entire life, 1 foot in Westport and 1 foot in Washington, which means you gotta be able to do yoga to do that. But he lives a part of the year in Cape Isle, a street right down Main Road, Cape Isle, and part of the year in Washington, D.C. So part of the year in the real world, part of the year in the not real world, in Washington. And Peter has worked in all kinds of political campaigns for Al Gore, for John Kerry, for former President Barack Obama. He has worked as chief of staff for Senator Frank Church. And some of the Republicans are creating this committee. They said it's going to be like the Church Committee. He worked for the real Church Committee, knows what that is about. He has advised campaigns in South Africa, Mozambique, Romania, Hungary, other countries around the world. He has advised General Motors, which is bigger than most of those other countries that I just mentioned, Lockheed Martin, and the Humane Society. He worked for me, helping me get elected as mayor of New Bedford, and many, many other campaigns and causes. So all levels of government, private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector, he knows his way around. Without further ado, please welcome our neighbor, Peter Fenn. Peter.
So if I just direct, you'll be okay? She's taping this. Now that's scary, Somebody like me who always says the wrong thing. So we'll have to have an 18.5-minute gap in there somewhere. First of all, thank you all for coming. Such a beautiful day. Could have had it yesterday, it turns out, but that looked very chancy. So it's wonderful to see everybody here, and Lori and Megan for putting this all together, all the hard work that went into it, and for Big John's words, which if I were to translate all that he said, and someone was asking about bumper sticker slogans and short things, I just say political hack, and then you're okay, and you're done. But I was thinking, a little bit about really this upcoming election, about Hurricane Donald, and I was sort of hoping now that he might go the way of Hurricane Lee and disappear out to sea. I think that's definitely a wishful thinking for sure. But what I thought I'd do is to, and this is really, I don't have too much to say here, but I come from Washington, so you know how that works. But I have some handouts which I won't give to you now, because what you'll do is you'll read them, and then you won't, we'll have a little trouble with the dialogue. But I hope I get enough of them. I got about 20, so. Yeah, I have to say that, not going back too far here, I was born in December of 1947. I came to Westport in the summer of 1948 for the first time. And I was kind of busy that summer because I was helping Harry Truman in his re-election bid. That took some time, but ultimately it worked out okay, and we defeated Thomas Dewey. So, but also I was also busy. We're talking about the Red Sox. As a pitching coach for Ted Williams, I thought I was going to be rather helpful, and he did in 1948 bat 369. So, and you can look that up, actually, because I did. But anyway, my favorite baseball player growing up. So if you think I'm from Washington and I lie a lot, that'll sort of put your run on out there. George Santos is not my real name. I mean, what I thought I'd do was take a little bit of a 30,000-foot view. I will say to you what I used to say to my George Washington University class that I taught for about 20 years, which is, for God's sake, raise your hand, interrupt me if you have a question, or if it's something I don't understand. That's the deal we'll make. And if you go on too long, I'll just cut you off. And my wife, who often comes to these kinds of things, as hard as it is probably a little like Lori. She usually sit in the back and it's time for me to move on.
Allison, I know the tricks.
Allison knows the game, yeah, there's a whole lot you can do. So I'm going to start a little bit. I used to do an awful lot of TV stuff, talking head junk. I don't do much of that anymore. I told the Fox people a long time ago I wasn't going on there. Sean Hannity, no, bye-bye. So, but I haven't done that much. But I was asked to come talk about the church committee on Ali Velsh's show with Michael Beschloss, who I have a great deal of respect for. He's a very wise historian, I think. Also pretty good on TV. So I want a little out of practice. But we were talking about whether the Jim Jordan Committee was really like the church committee. Well, first of all, we had one basic difference. We kind of followed the facts, and they made up the facts. So that's a fairly big difference. But the real weaponization is happening by the Jim Jordans of the world, by the Donald Trumps of the world, who was weaponizing the Justice Department at the end of his term, trying to turn it into an arm of his own political will, Donald Trump. So, at any rate, in the discussion, we started to get a little worked up. I tend to do that. And Michael Beschloss did also. And he said on this show with Ali Velshi, we are moving towards fascism. And he explained why he held that position. Now, that's not something that you find a historian, he's not a down-the-middle guy, but say very often. And that's a heck of a charge to make, really. But I think one of the things that John was talking about this upcoming election, and to a certain extent 2020 and 2022, this really is about preserving our democratic system. This really is about what direction does this country go. And most of you are pretty sophisticated and pretty well aware of that. But, does democracy survive and thrive in the 21st century, which is now our theme at the Frank Church Institute in beautiful Boise. And I think it's up in the air, to be perfectly frank. I mean, I think that when we have a presidential candidate who says, oh, we don't want EPA, we don't want the Department of Education, and by the way, the civil service, we're done with that. We're going to get rid of the civil service, and we'll appoint who we want in jobs all over the country. And that's a long discussion, but that's a pretty scary thing. But, one of the things that seems to me is that this has been coming at us for quite a long time. It's been, I think the Newt Gingrich period in the early 90s, even just going back to Reagan with some of the stuff. Reagan was a lot better in a lot of cases, but once in the 90s this stuff started happening, impeachments. And it's like democracy and America are the frog. It's been dropped in to the pot of tepid water, and then the heat is gradually turned up. So that the country, really, a lot of people haven't seen it coming, and the Democrats and others, independents, normal folks, have not done what they should have done to point it out. And instead, we found ourselves in a really tough situation. But I wrote a piece in 2015 before Donald Trump's nomination was at all clear. In fact, most people thought he was a joke. But the Freedom Caucus had just started. And it was a rump group in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they started to object to even the conservatives in the Congress. And you all may remember what happened to John Boehner, and also what happened to Paul Ryan. And John Boehner said this right after Trump was elected. He said, they are anarchists. They want total chaos. Tear it all down and start over. Now, we should have been a little bit smarter to listen to John Boehner, to be perfectly frank. And one of the things that is pretty scary is, and we're seeing it right now, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of this month in Washington, but this is a case where the crazies have taken over the asylum. I mean, McCarthy is, not God's gift to much, but at least, first he wants to keep his speakership, but, he's willing to make some kind of arrangements, even though they're not ones we would particularly like. But this group of Freedom Caucus folks are taking things over. And in a sense, right now, thank God for the Senate, which is, someone who said is that, you've got the hot teacup and you've got the saucer, and the saucer is the Senate and cools the hot water. My wife would be doing this to me right now. So, at any rate, that I think I don't have to go into a lot of this. But I'll give you one other quote. Former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, General Kelly, who's a pretty interesting fellow, was asked about a second Trump administration. Well, how would it look? And he said, same word that Boehner used, chaotic. A non-stop gunfight with Congress in the courts. I mean, and we're certainly seeing that locally in Wisconsin now, the Supreme Court, all kinds of things. But one of the things that I wanted to do, and then we'll go over, and please interrupt me if you have a comment. We'll go over a couple of scenarios for how this 2024 election might turn out. And then what I'd really like to talk to you all about and hear your views is what can be done? What can we all do as citizens and especially as Democrats? But a great friend of mine, a guy named Doug Sosnick, and I have a memo that he did, which I'm going to hand out to you. This is another little memo he did, which I'm playing off of. He really illustrated how things have changed in American politics. And we all remember Tip O'Neill and his famous quote, all politics is local, right? Well, Doug pointed out that there is certainly a lot of local politics going on. You elected a new sheriff, thank God, here. We got school board elections, and we got elections to the select board, and we got a lot going on. But in terms of the national picture, politics ain't so local anymore. My boss, Frank Church, could never, ever been elected for 24 years to the Senate from Idaho if he hadn't spent a lot of time on local issues, taking care of Idaho's water, helping farmers, doing things for the environment. And, he was able to do the Intelligence Committee, to go after multinational corporations, to be one of the first people to speak out against the Vietnam War, to negotiate a settlement and when he first came in on civil rights legislation. I mean, you know, nowadays, that is not easy. And here's the interesting statistic about this, which really, I think, we think very long and hard about. I mean, you look at that map, red states, blue states. There are only 5 United States senators who represent a state that the president of their party or the candidate of their party has not won, right? So if you come from a red state, it's really, really hard to be a Democrat and get elected. And those folks are, and some of them are not likely to be around anymore. I mean, we've got West Virginia, not that we're shedding any tears about Joe Manchin probably in this room, but we're not going to have a Democratic senator, I don't think, in the state of West Virginia. You know, my kids live in Montana. John Tester's got the race of his life during a presidential year in the state of Montana. In Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown, who is fabulous in my book, he's in trouble. He's in real trouble. So, you know, you've got a situation there which is sort of scary, because what does that mean? Independents, folks who split tickets. It doesn't happen that much anymore. And that's not healthy, I don't think, for the country. In the House, there are only 23 that represent districts outside their own party. Now, the good news for us as Democrats is 18 of those 23 are Republicans that represent districts that Joe Biden carried. And those are the targets for taking over the House, which actually I think we have a very, very good chance of doing. So that's one of the first things. The second thing that there's so much data on now is the complete shift between educated voters and those without college educations. Used to be, of course, the Republicans were more wealthy, more educated. The Democrats were less educated, less wealthy. In this last election, Biden carried college-educated voters by 15 points. In 2012, Romney carried them by 14. That's a 29-point swing in 8 years. Does that hold? I don't know. But, you know, more and more people, hopefully, are going to college and getting educated, you know. But this is tricky, because the other side of this is you got to do something to win those working class voters. I mean, Donald Trump's talking about going to Michigan. Now, I don't see him standing on a picket line, to be honest with you, but, you know, there's got to keep an eye on that. You keep an eye on my time, John, because if I'm going bananas,
No, you're good.
am I all right?
Yes.
Look at Laura.
I do tend to. Yeah, look at
You look at
me. The other point, of course, that most of you know, especially as we go to 2024, national polls are next to meaningless. I mean, this is, you know, we follow this horse race stuff all the time, up, down, up, down. This is coming down to 8 states, folks. I mean, the rest of this is predetermined. So you've got, you know, Arizona. It's states we probably all know: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I mean, outside them, something might happen, you know, 1 or 2 might change. But that's a pretty targeted group for your effort. The other thing which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second.
Question.
Yeah, good.
Do you think Ohio is on the fence there?
You know, not right now, but I do think that's one of those states that could be. If you look at some of these issues that we're going to talk about, if you look at some of these issues like abortion and protecting democracy, and with a guy like Sherrod Brown, you know, this may be reverse coattails. Sherrod Brown can help Joe Biden in the state of Ohio. I still wouldn't write off, you know, Ohio definitely, but right now it's not on people's sort of hot list. But that's a great question.
Can you read that list again of states?
Sure. Arizona, which we certainly know a lot about after last time. Georgia, which we also know a lot about. Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, which is kind of interesting. I tend to think New Hampshire's probably in pretty good shape, but it does go back and forth, and it's tricky. North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The next thing that I think the Republicans, how many of you, by the way, this is nerdy, but how many of you watched the Republican debate, the first Republican debate? Wow, that's pretty good. Okay. In your mind, who came out strongest to win a general election from that debate?
I thought Nikki Haley did.
That's exactly what I thought. And when she said, we don't want to demonize the issue of abortion, she put herself out as pro-life, but she was unbelievably smart in the way she was dealing with that issue. And she could see, this is 7 states we've had referendums in the last year. Every one of them. The pro-choice side, the abortion side has won, and this is only increasing. We'll talk about it in a minute, which relate to other suburbs and other things. The other thing that I think is so important here is small donor fundraising. You know, it used to be the big money people carried all the weight, and then a lot of big money people still do. But Act Blue, if you've given, but most of you are on their in their system. You know how many people they have on the Democratic side? 7.4 million people have given through Act Blue. Well, the Republicans decided, well, we got to do something like that, shouldn't we? So they created Win Red, and they had 2.5 million, which is a heck of a lot less than 7.4. However, you have the MAGA crowd and Trump. So I don't know what his list is, but it's serious. The final thing I'll mention, and then we'll talk about the scenarios. The final thing I'll mention is, and again, this is partly obviously due to what happened with the pandemic, but you know, because you can early vote, because more people are going to vote by mail. On Election Day in 2020, 69% of voters voted before Election Day. That was up from 40% in 2016. And I think that holds and gets stronger. So even the Republicans are finally figuring out, gee, maybe we got to do something about this. So those are some interesting things I think that will impact politics for the years to come. Okay, so let me take you quickly through, before Lori cuts me off.
No.
The 2 likely scenarios. So you want the good news or the bad news?
Both.
You're going to get both. I'll start with the good news. It always makes me feel better. The good news is Biden wins. And 4 reasons, basically. Trump's unacceptable. He is absolutely unacceptable to a large segment of the population. Is Biden terribly acceptable to a lot of folks? Not particularly. But the interesting thing about this is, you know, if you look at the next year and you see what's going to happen with the trials, you see where independents are going, the persuadables, the suburban voters. A lot of people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. They were sick of the Clintons. They were sick of the Bushes. They wanted not normal. They've had it. They were sick of Congress after 20 years of negative numbers. So they wanted not normal. Well, they got not normal bad. They didn't get not normal good. And a lot of folks figured that one out by 2020, right? And then, again, my friend Doug Sosnick did some numbers on this. So there's a group he calls the double doubters. The double doubters are people that dislike both Biden and Trump. So how do they vote right now? Now, this is the caveat. Head to head. No third party candidate. Head to head. We'll get to that third party thing in a minute. But right now, Biden beats Trump with the double doubters in a head-to-head matchup by 39 points. Now that is huge. So that's traditional American politics. I don't like any of them, you know, popular vote our houses, but when it comes to, you know, these people are gonna vote and they gotta choose. So that's number two. Then notice number one. The number two, which is, and I put some stuff in the handout, is younger voters. Now, Celinda Lake, who's really my great friend, we've been buds a long time, she did a piece in the Washington Post, which is in that packet, and she polls for the president, for Biden, and she's really savvy. And she wrote this piece. Every year, 4 million young people turn 18 and are eligible to vote.
But they don't.
Now, I hate to say this to this crowd, I mean it. I gave it up when I said end of 1947. But anyway, each year, about 2.5 million older folks pass away. So from 2016 to 2024, that's 20 million folks passing away. And for the younger voters, potentially younger voters now, from 2016 to 2024, that's 32 million young people.
You gotta get them to vote.
Yes, now we gotta get them to vote. And the key number here, again, you're all math whizzes, I'm sure, but the net gain for the Generation Z crowd is 52 million potential voters, right?
Two of them right over there.
Yes, you guys. Thank God. So what do young people care about? They care about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? Not too much, sadly, a lot of them. Do they care a lot about the candidates? Are they really into candidate stuff? Not so much. As Celinda points out, they care about issues. And what are the issues they care about? They care about abortion, boy. They really care about abortion. They care about cultural issues and LGBTQ issues. They don't like the transgender stuff. They don't like what the Republican Party and the Republican candidates are saying and doing about these issues one damn bit. They care about the environment big time. I can never pronounce his name, Ramaswamy or whatever it is. I mean, he's up there in the debate saying it's a hoax. Now, man, we're long beyond that, aren't we? Good, keep saying it, because you're turning off a lot of people. So I'm for Ramaswamy. Go. He also has the brilliant idea that we would raise the voting age. I don't know if you know, to 25. He thinks you have to be 25 to vote. You know, conserve the military, that's okay, but you know. Anyway, he's Looney Tunes, but that's cool. So the third major thing which we've talked about in this election will be abortion. There's no question about it. It's going to play heavier. And a lot of people were wondering, have we kind of passed over that? Is this no? Because what are they doing at local levels? They're passing laws that say that if you travel on this road out of Texas, you can be prosecuted. If you help somebody go from one place to another to get an abortion, you can be prosecuted. And you know, and they're going to keep doing this. And what the Supreme Court did, and they should have been smart enough to figure it out, speaking of chaos again, they created an environment where everything is going to get worse and worse and more ungovernable. And I didn't see it, but I read a little bit about Trump today. He's kind of backing off and underneath the press. Yes, sleazeball. He said, excuse me, and this is not underneath the press, this is earlier. He said, people tried to do something about Roe v. Wade for 50 years, but I did it. I killed it. And I think that's a nice word too to use, you know. I mean, anyway. So, but that issue, you know, boom. Okay, so what's the fourth reason we win? And this is a big deal. And this is iffy. The economy improves. I mean, it's improving. We're looking at the recession numbers that folks are saying now. No, we're not going to do a recession. The job rate is incredibly good. The salaries, average salaries are going up right now. 60% of Americans believe their own personal financial situation is good or excellent. Now, sadly, they right now don't give Joe Biden much credit for that. If anything, they're critical of him about it, and they're worried about the trajectory. But you think back on this. In 1982 and 1983, people were saying the same thing about Reagan. We won 26 House races in 1982 because the economy was in trouble, in recession. You know, and the same thing happened to Clinton. And you know, going into '94, he got crushed, and then things began to come back. And you know, 96, he defeated Dole handily. Even Obama. I mean, the numbers in 2010, losing midterms, but also on the economy were tough. A year out, he and Romney were kind of like that. I mean, this was, the Romney people, one of my friends, the media guy for Romney, they thought that this was going their way. I mean, they thought they were going to make it. So a year in politics is a long time, but the key is the perception. You can give them all the statistics, but what's the perception? So there you go. So is that good news?
Yes.
Okay, now you can hear the bad news. Sorry. Okay, scenario 2. The big elephant in the room. Third-party candidates. We didn't have it much in 2020, thank the good Lord. Because that could have influenced the electoral vote big time if there was a strong third-party candidate. I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, and I really don't want to own Jill Stein, I can tell you. I mean, and she was a serious problem in 2016. If you look at that, the numbers, and I went through it, I won't bore you with the exact numbers, but if you want, I'll give it to you. We lost Wisconsin, we lost Michigan, and we lost Pennsylvania solely, well, not solely, but if it weren't for Jill Stein taking those votes away, Hillary Clinton would have won those 3 states. So we're heading into a serious, and you know, Gore and Nader, and everybody remembers Florida. You know, we did win Florida actually, but we also, without Nader, it would have been a slam dunk Florida. Also, New Hampshire. Gore would have won New Hampshire, which was ironically enough electoral votes to elect him president. People kind of forget that one. So at any rate, this is to me unbelievably. I'm not going to do the numbers. This is a very serious problem right now for Joe Biden, and everybody's all hepped up about about no labels. I know these guys. I can't stand them. I never could stand them, and they're just too cute by half. But they get on them. They're on the ballot now, 6 states, one of which is Arizona, and they put somebody together that has a name some recognition and takes votes away. They're a problem. To me, and this is, I'm really interested in your views of this. To me, the biggest danger right now is Cornel West on the Green Party ticket. Cornel West is a very charismatic, very clever fellow. He went from a progressive party to the Green Party for one very specific reason. They were on the ballot in 44 states in 2016, and they'll be close to on that this time. And, you know, he doesn't have to take, there's some polling which he might take votes in areas where we don't worry about, like California and New York. But Georgia, hello, Arizona again, Michigan, Pennsylvania, if you have close elections in those situations, he's in trouble. Could the one person who could maybe convince him not to do this? Well, Obama might help a little, but they got a little iffy together. Bernie Sanders. Bernie's the guy. He was on the plane with Bernie, campaigned with Bernie. I don't think Bernie's going to do it, but a lot of folks at some point, they've got to talk some sense into this. The history of this is just so devastating. But I don't know, I don't hold out a lot of hope. Okay, so the second reason, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Where would the Cornell votes come from? Would the disaffected youth?
This is great question, great point, and I should have elaborated there. Not only does he pick up African American votes clearly, in some cases, but this is where young people will be a problem. Because if they're fed up and they hate it, and everybody's too old and, you know, not charismatic, and boy, Joe's not doing his thing as far as charisma goes lately. And I don't know what you guys think, but that scares me. You know, whether he, you know, I think he would pull, because he'll say the right things on abortion, on the environment, and he'll say it very well. This guy's a rhetorician and a preacher, and he'll do very well with that. But that's a really good question. Good point. The second reason, of course, is that the economy, things just go to hell. And they may go to hell because the Freedom Caucus and the Republicans in the House screw everything up. They may go to hell because the strike expands, and we have a hell of a problem with the auto companies. You know, I mean, you just don't know. But if the economy, and it's, you know, this is James Carville, it's the economy stupid. I mean, if people are feeling really bad about the economy and they're not giving Joe Biden any credit next summer and fall, that's trouble. The third element would, obviously, it's another elephant in the room, not so much an elephant, is the health thing. I mean, if you know, if something happens with Biden and people, you know, fall. Well, it's really both. I mean,
The other guys.
yeah, I mean, if he keeps eating his Big Macs, you know, I don't know. But he only weighs 215 pounds, so that's really good. I weigh about 206, guys, and I'm 5'11", not 6'2" or 3" or whatever. He doesn't weigh 250. See the pictures of him playing golf? Oh my word! Anyway, I'm really nasty, actually. You got, I'm going to be in trouble. But don't tell anybody where I live. All right, so in a grueling presidential campaign, I can't believe Biden's able to do what he's doing. You know, at one point he's over in Asia and he says, I'm going to bed. Hello? I mean, I'm not going to bed. Okay, so the fourth thing I put on there is sort of the unpredictable, a foreign crisis that goes sour for Biden, a terrorist attack that looks bad, and some kind of and I put the labor strikes before the strikes when I was writing this. The Hunter Biden stuff, I don't think they're going to find much, but they don't have to find anything. They're going to stay on it for a year. So that will play in. Even though the Trump grifter family continues to get their money from the Middle East. So, at any rate, those are the two scenarios. Now, yes.
What about Ukraine?
You know, I think if hopefully we'll get this budget bill through, and there'll be more money in the Ukraine, and the Europeans are stepping up too. If something happens and Ukraine basically wins the day between now and next November, huge win for Biden. Huge.
More on the
Ever
bad
go-
side.
Huh?
We were talking about the bad stuff.
Yeah, but no, I mean, if the Russians overwhelm them, and that's going to be a problem, because everybody say, well, your money was wasted. What were you doing all this? I mean, that's an unpredictable one too. But that could play in. Usually, foreign policy stuff doesn't play as much, in these kind of elections, but it definitely could. The other kind of scenario is, my friend Peter Hart, who's a great pollster, used to do NBC, Wall Street Journal polls, he sent a note to a few of us the other day. He said, okay, he said, I'm going to lay a bet that it isn't going to be Biden versus Trump ultimately in next year. I'll give you guys 2-to-1 odds. Now, Peter's a little older than me, and I think he maybe has a few screws loose here on this one. But, you know, Peter's pretty good. He might have been right. So the question is, you know, a couple things. Does something happen health-wise with Trump, and then suddenly Trump or the you know, the legal stuff goes down, and we have a Nikki Haley, serious problem. And but the other thing is Biden starts thinking this through, and the only way this happens, in my view, he's got advisors, he's got friends, he's got guys writing columns that they shouldn't write in the Washington Post, which, you know, I thought was a terrible column. But not that I don't think that should be discussed. But it's Joe Biden. Joe Biden says, and the family says, Joe, you've done an amazing thing. You've got rid of Trump. You turned the economy around. The kind of legislation you passed is right out of Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s. You did what you said you were going to do. Let it go. It's not worth it. Let it go. And you may not be the only one that can beat a Donald Trump or another candidate. So here's the interesting thing. We were talking about this last night, Lori and John and I. Look, you got Harris is in, right? She's run as the vice president. But you've got Gavin Newsom. You've got Amy Klobuchar. You've got Josh Shapiro maybe in Pennsylvania. Real, you know, he's a very ambitious guy. You got Cory Booker, who was in last time. You know, Chris Murphy's running for re-election, but Chris Murphy's a really good senator, and he's a really smart guy. Who knows? There's J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. There's Elizabeth Warren, I don't think does it. I think she thinks she's probably, I don't know, too old, but she might. You've got Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. She's a superstar. Excuse me, people say, oh, you don't have anybody on the bench. Yes, we do. We have a pretty good group of candidates. Yeah, I got this one. He might switch parties, you know.
Well, is there a time for a candidate like that to run?
Well, but they're all at the starting gate at basically the same time. Difference in name recognition. Clearly, Harris has a higher name recognition than most of the others, and has access probably to some dough, and she's run before, which always helps. But, you know, her numbers aren't very good either. I think, you know, I mean, it would be a wild and crazy ride if he pulled. Anyway, I think that's, I think it's unlikely, but, you know. I don't know, I'll give you a little quick thing. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, how close is the situation that you present here? You have all of these dire circumstances, all of these dire circumstances, and then you really brighten up at the prospect of Biden stepping aside, and you listen to candidates who could do a good job. And why wouldn't Biden, always the political realist, finally do an LBJ and say, I'm getting out?
Well, I know, because he doesn't have a Vietnam hanging over his head. You're right. And the question is, why would he do this? And I think it's unlikely. I have to confess. I do think it's unlikely. And it might have to be someone health-related or something like that. But, you know, I'm reading this great book by Hubert Humphrey about the 1948 speech that he gave, the lead up to that and his life. And he was a professor of mine at Macalester. I mean, he was, after he lost the election, I was vice chairman of the Minnesota Young Democrats, college vice chairman, and I wasn't real high on Humphrey in 1968. He was maybe a lot of humor at that time. But this is a guy, with real integrity. And they talk in that book about, which I recommend to you all, by a guy named Freeman. And they talk about Harry Truman. Everybody said Harry Truman can't win. Harry Truman, you know, he's a loser. You know, he's the caretaker. They had a poll at the time of the Democratic Convention showed Harry Truman losing 50-28. And it didn't work. Nobody wanted to run. They wanted to get Eisenhower. That was a joke. And Wallace. But at any rate, your point is really well taken, because it's saying, hey, look, we're turning this into a free-for-all, and it's better to have Biden and to have the record, which we've talked about that's worth running on, and the issues that were worth running, than throwing it all to the wind. So I think you're probably correct about that. The other quick thing I will just say is, as I said, I think unless something is bad, we win the House back, and that would be huge. I mean, having a new Speaker of the House, thank you very much. Yeah,
The Senate is much more difficult, though.
very difficult, because I mean, it's conceivable we could hold it, but everything has to go our way. I'll just give you a quick 1-2 on that. I think West Virginia's gone, right? So I would say, okay, we lost one. Now all we have to do is lose another one. We have no place to gain unless something happens with Ted Cruz or something crazy, which I don't see Texas going Democratic, I assume. But, we don't have any, the chessboard is bad for us. So we talked about Tester, who's really a good friend. I think he wins in Montana, despite the craziness. He's real. He really is a farmer. He speaks plainly to people. They'll cut him some slack. He's not a phony baloney like a lot of these folks. So that one. The Arizona situation, Kerry Lake, thank you very much. Bring it on. And the rumor that I was hearing from a really good friend, very close to folks in Arizona, I don't know whether this happened. What Kirsten Sinema sees are terrible poll numbers. And she's saying, I can't win this thing. I'm taking this, I'm going to resign the Senate seat. I'm going to take a real nice Wall Street job and cash in. Not out of the realm of possibility. Again, rumors are rumors, whatever. But then the Democratic governor appoints Ruben Gallego, the guy who's running as a Democrat. Well, that makes things a lot better. Sherrod Brown, I love Sherrod Brown. Part of this is my optimism and my just really liking the guy. Ohio's really hard, but they haven't figured it out on the Republican side there yet. So, we need to win that one. And then we got to hold everything else. What am I leaving off?
How about Bashir appointing somebody that you just can't make it?
Oh, the Michigan open seat.
No, Mitch,
If he resigns.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting one because she's got a Democratic governor appointing, right, exactly. And that could be.
I think they have a law in Kentucky that said that the legislature, if you appoint somebody, if somebody resigns, you've got to appoint somebody from the same party.
Is that?
That's a law.
And there may be, that I don't know. Okay, very good.
Because Andy Bashir with that.
Oh, yeah. And he's, got this election coming up too, which I think he'll be okay, but you don't know. Yep.
How do you see the UAW strike impacting the Democratic Party?
It's really interesting. And I'm not close to those guys. We used to do a fair amount of union work, but I'm not close to the UAW. As John said, I worked for General Motors. So that was a while ago. But I'll tell you what, I think UAW is playing it right by striking in select plants and keeping it down and then getting back to the bargaining table. And I think if they come out with an agreement, it's not going to be 42% increase in union salaries.
40% over 4 years. Yeah.
Anyway, if they pull something off, and the Biden shows any leadership in this, and here's the deal. Okay, we get the union, the heads of the unions, but are the rank and file union guys happy? A lot of them are Trumpers, or they're very conservative folks. If some of those people, turn positive towards Biden and the Democrats, then that means a lot, maybe mean a lot. I think Wisconsin, we've got a race there. I think she's going to be fine. I think I may be getting wrong, but the problem is there's like I need my glasses for all this now. You've got Casey in Pennsylvania. Yeah, there's Baldwin. We just have a lot on the board. And, you know, if they just, you got West Virginia, all they need is one more. And we're in trouble. So anyway, yeah.
So if Biden drops out for whatever reason and there is a free-for-all, when is it too late for that? When does that have to activate? Probably.
Well, yeah, within the next month or so. I don't know. Because you folks have to file. They got filing deadlines, and each state is different on that. I haven't looked at all the states, but you know, you're gonna have a calendar that they've got to meet. I mean, that is clearly a kind of a line shot. But, let's see what you know. Okay, how much? Yeah, I wanted to talk. Hear your views about local stuff and campaign giving and all that stuff. Yeah.
I was curious about your views on the 24th Amendment, precluding Trump from running.
14, I was to say, yeah. I don't think it goes anywhere, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it was a good piece that the lawyers wrote, the conservative lawyers. I can't see that thing. And if it does, it's going to take forever. And the Supreme Court? No, I don't think so. So here's a couple things. I started something called Open Secrets, the Center for Responsive Politics, back in the early 80s, when people weren't spending hardly any money on campaigns. And one of the things in there is their latest on this last election for House and Senate, $10 billion. The presidential campaigns, $6 billion. $16 billion is spent. In Georgia, the Senate race, $400 million. It's insane, crazy. We all agree with that. The problem now is, and as we were talking about, small donors is where it's at. So I put my money into local races. And if you're going to give $1,000 and you give it, no offense, I love the guy, but you give it to Raphael Warnock, you'll be lucky to get a thank you note. I mean, you know, there's other places to put the money. Second thing I would do for all of you, because you're on these lists, hit stop on every text from every candidate, no matter how much you like them, because you never get any useful information. It's all about send another donation. Same thing is true for email, and I've got to be better at this even myself. Unsubscribe to everything. And then make a plan. Decide which races you're kind of interested in, who the people are you want to give your money to, and make a plan of how you're going to do that. And if you need some help with that, this is not going to sound terrible, don't necessarily go to the party committees. Because they go heavily incumbent, they don't take risks. There's a group in Boston that I think is pretty good. Maybe some of you members go there. Force Multiplier. Anybody know Force Multiplier? Yeah. They're fairly sophisticated. And they do a lot of the homework so you don't have to. And there are other groups like that. We have one in a couple in D.C. Nope. And then, you know, if you like to do door-to-door stuff, I mean, I know a lot of you went to like Virginia, New Jersey. That was a big win. And I'm a media guy. I make TV ads all the time. It's too much money. The ads, they suck. I mean, they really do. I mean, they're negative. They're not swaying that many voters, to be honest, for the amount of money you're putting into it. So,
how
go
about,
door to door.
talking about ads, how about the introduction of artificial intelligence now, which they're looking, right?
Oh, absolutely. The guy who works for me who's my editor, and he's fabulous. So he sends me an AI, his son is in 5th grade. He's running for student body vice president. He's got a speech, which is terrific. I mean, I'm going, oh my God. And he was just saying, Peter, I think we ought to be using this for any ads that we do next time. But you can bet this kind of stuff will happen. I mean, and it's kind of terrifying, to be perfectly honest. I don't know how good they'll be on the political, but for speeches, those kinds of things. I know folks are using that stuff.
I heard you say, I think, that we might get the House back. How do we hold the Senate? Where do we, should we try?
Oh, in terms of where you're gonna give your money
And effort.
and effort. Given where you are, I think I'd pick the House. I'd pick some of those seats that Biden carried the districts. I'd also take, I mean, I wouldn't give money to the, you know, the certain winners. I mean, part of this to be part
No,
of.
she's asking about the Senate, Peter.
It's not, no, I was saying to the House, not to the Senate. But you're asking me which ones in the Senate?
Well, it sounds like the House is a little safer, the Senate's more iffy.
Right. So you're asking which senators, oh, I mean, if I were given money, and you wanted to in that, it's still, I mean, Sherrod Brown would be the place I'd go. And, because, first of all, you do, I mean, you're not going up to somebody that's like, oh, you're going up to a great guy. You know, the good news about Montana is that, yeah, it's not that expensive out there, right? Ohio is really expensive. So, that one. And then I'd wait and see on the Arizona deal. I think Ruben Gallego, he sends me an email every day.
Do you think phone banking in like Ohio would work?
Yeah, I think the phone banking stuff works. A lot of people are doing postcards. I think the postcards are not quite as good, but they're easy to do. And if you're targeting, that's good. You know, I think the you know, it's a time on your hands kind of thing. But you know, I know a group from up here went to Virginia. I mean, for us, the folks in the Washington area, you know, forget what's going on in Maryland. Nothing's going on. You know, and we've got a heck of an election this November in Virginia. And if the Republicans take over the House and the Senate, which they can, well, they've already got the House, they take over the Senate, we're in real deep trouble. Because this Governor Youngkin is also a Looney Tune, and he thinks he should be president already. So that's if folks have time to go down there in October and knock on doors and stay with people, it's a great place to go.
Is there any national effort to discredit third-party candidacies?
Yeah, there is actually. There are several organizations and groups that, like Third Way and some others, that have argued very strenuously about it. There was a poll that the No Labels people put out saying, we can win, which is a complete and utter joke. And they've knocked that down. But as I say, the one I worry most about is Cornel West.
I mean, you've done a nice job of just saying it comes down to 8 states, and then there's swing voters in that state. And then that could be a pickup for Biden to make. I was pleased to hear 39% or whatever on the doubters, because I think the election's about Biden, not Trump. But on the notion of I don't like either of them kind of thing. But the notion of young people not voting. I mean, the last election, 27%, it was a record. And I work with young people as well, and they're turned off by the whole system. Right. And you add African Americans and Hispanics, and if you've got like 8 states, right, and you're talking about center cities, right, that we're going to, Trump won't win, we'll lose. And what can be done to shore that up? I mean, can Biden appoint a youth advisory committee or something?
Yeah, he has a lot of that going, and he has as you know, a Hispanic campaign manager, and you know, the way I look at this thing is, Celinda Lake pointed out, if you're going to reach young people, you got to do it with issues. You got to do it where they are. And you know, one of the things that is incredible is the work done in college campuses, because that's totally natural constituency, and making sure is high turnout. So there's a big effort there. And for example, the African American vote, when we were talking about it, in Wisconsin, there's a group called Souls to the Polls that we work with out of Milwaukee. They're pretty good. And they've been through several of these. The trick is going to some of these groups and organizations and that have been in the game for a while and get it. You know, the other point about this is, and you're all probably sophisticated about this, you can give unlimited money to a 501c4, which is a group like Souls to the Polls. A lot of other groups have C3s, have tax exempt, you know, just generic kind of get out the vote. Now that's tax deductible. The other side has used that for years. Our people have been, you know, make sure you get the T and the I's the T crossed and the I's dotted, blah, 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 blah. And finally folks are saying, okay, we're gonna do a lot more of this kind of effort. But the bottom line, I tell you, this is really tricky stuff because, you know, if Nate Cohen is right in the Times, and he's just threw this out last week, that some of the decline in Black and Hispanic vote will happen in some of these states, as I said, that we're going to win anyway, right? Like California and Illinois.
There is Milwaukee.
But you've got to get it. But no, and the other point, and there's a lot of folks who are working on this too. The other point is you've got to do more in rural areas. And this is personal, this is door to door, this is talking their language and about issues. My daughter-in-law is the head of League of Conservation Voters in Montana. They are all over local issues and trying to deal with this in a rural state like that. And because, you know, we used to lose at 55-45, maybe even 60-40 in these rural areas. As we were talking about, we're losing them 80-20 now, you know, and there aren't that, I mean, you know, that's a problem. But again, the battleground, suburbs. The battleground's going to be the suburbs. And that's what happens. Yeah,
I just want to say one thing before you interrupt. I think it's equally important to make sure that we get college kids registered to vote.
And even high school kids, if you can.
Oh, that's right. As long as
And,
they're
there's
younger
a,
than 25.
I should have the name of the, well, maybe I do. Anyway, I should pass this stuff out to
I
you.
can do
Well,
that.
actually, I wanted to say a couple more questions, and then Peter's.
I'll stick around. I'm
Yeah,
not,
Peter's gonna stick around, but if we start to wrap this up with one or two more questions, and then, we wanna make sure, people, have some time to visit the two, gravity-fed donation jars.
you know, I should have made a pitch, shouldn't I? You know, John Kennedy had a great line one time, and it was $100 a plate dinner. Can you imagine, $100 a plate? And it was a big crowd, and he said, you know, I'm deeply touched, but not as deeply touched as all of you.
Couple more questions.
Yeah.
Peter, this gerrymandering stuff that's going on, states defining the ruling that what they're doing is inappropriate, it seems to me fairly critical. Something happened there.
And I think the classic example right now, and has been, is Wisconsin. I mean, this is beyond a joke, right? I mean, they went beyond the limit on the gerrymandering to such a point where they control the House and the Senate and can conceivably impeach Prushkowitz, or however you pronounce her name, who hasn't even tried a case yet. And you know, I think we've got to make it very clear that we stand for fair maps, that we stand for a commission that creates these districts, because this is not democratic, and this isn't the way and that's why there's so many issues on the preservation of democracy, and this one, and money in politics too. I mean, it's outrageous, it's crazy, it's nuts. But you know, it really, but we can't unilaterally, you know, withdraw either. I mean, we've done all of that. Virginia, the Democratic governor said, okay, we're gonna have a commission. Well, he could have gained another House seat. In Maryland, they did get another Democratic House seat, you know. So I don't know what, I just think, I don't know, I mean, it bothers me sort of morally that this happens. But,
Plus, we're not very good at it, and prove that in New York.
yeah, we did a great job in New York. No, but this makes a big difference.
If everything that everyone is saying about the younger generation is true, the issues are important, the local issues are important, why has not the National Democratic Party, or for that matter, the state, supported groups like the Town Democratic Party that's in Westport or in other areas? Because it would seem to me the more logical, maybe efficient thing for face-to-face discussions with 18-year-olds, and having done that before, it's not a pleasant thought, or 20-year-olds, is to do it talking about books in their library, schools that they will send their children to,
College
issues
loans.
of planning boards that are in their town. Why has that not been more supported?
I think that we have not been for decades now at the DNC very good at reading the tea leaves, to be honest, as well as sending out the tea to local areas. And you know, there's very much of a top-down attitude to that. I mean, I think that we have to face the fact that the parties are not nearly as effective and as strong as they once were. And this has been going on for a long, long time. I mean, David Broder of the Washington Post wrote a book about 35 years ago called The Party's Over. And he ain't seen nothing yet. He's passed away, so he's not seeing much. But he's a great guy. But you know, we've got to fight. And if parties aren't going to do it, there have to be local groups and organizations. And that's what this one group I'm with in D.C., we look for these groups in various states that know what they're doing with Hispanic voters, that know what they're doing with young people, that know what they're doing. There's a bunch of them in Pennsylvania, you know, Wisconsin has it, Arizona has it, Georgia. I mean, come on. I mean, that's 101. You know, what they did down there, thanks to, she should have won that. She's incredible.
So with what Peter just said, which is the parties aren't as strong as they used to be, and that you have to build them up at the local level, that is a tremendous segue to what we are doing here today. Thank you, Peter. A little applause for a quick reminder, Lori has one of the donation boxes, and she has the paper that 20 copies of the paper that Peter had, all at that table. And she also has the sign-up sheet if you would like to get notices of the Westport Democratic Town Committee. And I urge you, just as Peter said, we're going to rebuild the parties from the ground up. And we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, you know, how school committees are under attack, and other boards are under attack, libraries and everything else. But that is all part of the problem that Peter started out with about what happens when autocracies occur. They occur at every level of government. And that is what we are fighting at the local level, what Jim and the Dartmouth Democratic Town Committee are fighting in Dartmouth, what we're fighting in Westport, what is being fought in New Bedford and in Mattapoisett, I mean, you name it. And so the most fundamental thing you can do and resolve to do today is to say, I want to be part of the party rebuilding at the town level. And if you want to do something on top of that, by what Carol's organized, you know, postcards and donations, you know, to Sherrod Brown and everything, that's great. But fundamentally, we need to operate at the local level. So I hope you will donate to the local Democratic Town Committee. Sign up so you can be part of, you know, if you live in Dartmouth, of the Dartmouth Town Committee. If you live in Westport, the Westport Committee, because we need to build from the ground up. But Peter, thank you so much for inspiring us, as you frequently do. Really appreciate that. And Peter will be here because I know there are more questions you have. And so Peter will be here. Thank you all for your attendance.
Give something to eat.